welcome to Raj Sabha Television. I am Akhilesh Suman and you are watching Indian Standard Time. As you know, Indian Standard Time is a very special program. It is like a window to the world through which we try to understand a country or a phenomena in the world. And Corona is the newest phenomena on the globe. The whole world is feeling the problem from Corona. Its treatments are going on, but still nobody knows that how it will be treated, whether some treatment will be known to the world or not. But there is a country, there is a one or two countries in the world which have tried to escape the worst impacts of Corona. And one is South Korea. And here with me is a very special guest who is political minister of South Korean embassy in Delhi, Mr. Yoo Chang-ho. Welcome, Mr. Chang-ho.
Thank you, Mr. Akhilesh. Thank you for having me.
Mr. Ho, you know that if I ask that, what was the recipe that South Korea came out or tried to come out so quickly out of Corona menace in the world?
I think it's important to understand, to remember, first of all, that Corona peaked quite early in Korea compared to the rest of the world. While it hit Europe and the rest of the world, I think almost in mid-March or late March,
right.
Starting from mid-February and late February in particular,
Right.
Korea's new infected cases started to rise very drastically. And so I would have to say that, first of all, Korea is at a position at the moment where things are getting better. But we have to remember that Korea also peaked a little bit early
Right.
compared to the other countries.
But I think
But
that
in any case, sure.
I think Korea, tried to stop it by end of February itself. Isn't it?
So by the end of February, the Korean government really took it upon themselves to do three things, basically, which is to test as much as possible.
Right.
And so we have readily made available testing centers. Almost 650 or so testing centers are across Korea. And that is a lot for Korea, a country of Korea's size. And then, yes. And then,
What did
yeah,
you
sure.
do actually? What did you do? Did you lock down the whole country, or you locked down in parts, or what was the main strategy to tackle with the Corona menace?
So I think in Korea's case, the reason why it peaked at an early stage was because through a kind of there was a religious cult
Okay.
in gathering in Korea, and they have a very special way of worshiping, and they're
Right.
very close proximity to each other, and it's a kind of a strange, I think, way of worshiping, and they're
Right.
very close. And also, and so the infection somehow got infected through those events and a
Right.
very close proximity through thousands of people gathering,
Right.
and it peaked. And so at one time, even Korea showed almost 800 new cases on one day.
Oh my God.
And so when that happened, the Korean government just took it upon themselves to try and trace every member of that cult. And they got the list of membership, and they went ahead very aggressively to try and trace every aspect of that membership. And they were, I think, there was over almost about 10,000 members, and
Right.
I believe almost all of them have been tested now.
So did you have a checking equipment ready for you? Because it was a new disease and it was difficult to know that how will you check and how will you ascertain that whether it is a novel corona or not?
Right. So as soon as it broke out in China,
Right.
I think our experts and our companies, our
Right.
biomedic companies, took it upon themselves to really go and get the DNA sampling from the Chinese, and they developed testing kits, and that was done also very aggressively. And now we're producing almost 10,000 kits a day, and
Okay.
so yeah, and so uh, testing and tracing was done very, very aggressively at a
So
very early
China,
stage.
China allowed your doctors, your scientists to go there and take the DNA out of it.
So I think the DNA sampling was all shared. I think it was mandatory for Chinese to share the
Okay.
DNA sampling. Yes, yes.
So did you also help Chinese in trying to find out how to test it, or Chinese were doing their own, you were doing your own?
So I can't really talk much in extents about the cooperation between China and Korea in that sense. I'm
Okay.
sure there was a lot of cooperation going on. I
Right.
do know that Korea supplied a lot of PPEs, the personal protection equipment, to the Chinese in
Hmm.
the very beginning of the pandemic.
Right.
um, and so there was a lot of cooperation, and I think our biomedical companies and our experts were able to get good testing kits out very quickly. And so one of the key elements of Korea's very, I want to say, I don't want to say success because it's not over yet, but one of the ways that we were able to tackle this so well was because of this early kind of
Right.
testing in the very early stages. I think that was very important.
So you didn't need to go into lockdown situation like India is having the problem of lockdown. You didn't lock down your country. You didn't close your country.
So the Korean government has always been a little bit skeptical about
Okay.
lockdowns.
Okay.
Uh, we do know that lockdowns are sometimes effective, and it depends on situations.
Hmm.
Korean situation, where we have a very vibrant democracy, we have to think about long-term effects. So
Right.
even after pandemics, we don't want lockdown or such measures to affect our economy in the long run. And
Right.
so the Korean government has always been kind of skeptical about the effectiveness of lockdowns, and also the Korean government felt it was quite confident in tackling it without locking down. And so even now today, we don't have lockdowns.
You
Uh,
never went into lockdown.
we don't have lockdowns at the moment.
Okay.
We do urge the public to do social distancing. We urge the public to work at home, for example.
Okay. Okay. And
So,
they were working from home. They
right,
were
yes.
working from home.
Many are working from home, yes.
And public transports, public, cars, private cars, all were allowed on the roads. People were allowed
Yes,
to roam free on the roads.
right. All the public transport was in function, in operation.
Okay.
But if you look at pictures of the buses and the metros at the moment, they're very, very empty.
Okay. And even malls, shopping malls, did they were open or did they were closed? Restaurants, cinema halls like that.
Yeah. So they were never forced to close. I think the private sector, if they felt the need to close, they did. But it really, I should give credit to the Korean public. The
Public.
Korean public really pulled through. They did their part and they did their role. This is actually quite traditional for Korean public. Whenever there is a crisis, a national crisis,
They come out.
Korean public pulls through. Yes.
Okay. So when you were testing and you were knowing that this is coronavirus attack on certain individuals, then what was the treatment? Because treatment is still not known. So how people are getting treated in Korea? How could you curb the impact of bad impact of coronavirus on the individuals?
So obviously, without any kind of vaccine, and I understand that the vaccine, for any vaccine to come out, it takes a lot of time, especially to mass produce. And so treatment was basically quarantining the patient,
Okay.
putting the um, patients under extensive monitoring, um, and just treated it like a flu, I think. But if you see the fatality rate, the mortality rate in Korea, it's actually quite low.
Okay.
And so that, I think, for that, I give credit to our medical infrastructure. Korea's medical infrastructure, I don't know if you know,
I know.
is ranked ninth in the world. It's a
Right.
very, very advanced system when it comes to infrastructure in the medical field, and so even those who passed away through this pandemic, many of them were elderly. Many of them had other diseases or illnesses. And so those who passed away, and Korea's number is about 2% at the moment. Um, they're usually quite elderly part of the population.
So Koreans did not use hydroxychloroquine, that is a most sought after medicine in all over the world.
Yes, I haven't seen reports that Korea had been using that. I know that it's in demand at the moment, but I do know that also it's not proven to the extent that people are happy to be, and so we will have to see. But no, I don't think medicine was the
Okay.
key in the treatment of
So Korea
corona
did not
patients.
demand hydroxychloroquine from India. Are you aware that Korea demanded?
Uh, no, as of yet, we haven't formally made any requests for that
Okay.
to India.
So Prime Minister Narendra Modi talked to Korean President Moon Jae-in recently,
Yes, yes.
and both talked about cooperation on this issue. So what type of cooperation between Korea and India are you expecting that they can do?
Yeah, so obviously, you know very well, Akhilesh, that those two leaders are very, very close to each other. They
Right.
have that bond with each other. Um, And so I think from day one, really, our embassy has been in very, very close consultation with MEA, and
Right.
the Indian embassy in Seoul has been uh, uh, in close consultation with our foreign ministry. There are many things that we had to cooperate on. Uh, Things like flights, things like visas for travelers. Uh, we had to talk about if there was any uh, need for if India was to close its borders, how would the Koreans enter and leave? And so
Okay.
these were the kind of cooperations that were in the all through our this pandemic period.
And since you had developed, testing kits in the very beginning, and
Mm.
you must have developed ventilators. So are you exporting those things to India? Ventilator kits, PPEs, all these things?
Yeah, so it's my understanding that a vast number of these testing kits, together with the PPEs, are being sent to India. But these are being initiated by the, bless you, by the private sector themselves. So I
Okay,
think the Indian state governments and the Indian private sector has
right,
been in touch with Korean private sectors. And
right.
so the communications and the movement of these equipments have been going through in that format.
Is it going on? It's going on.
It's still going on, yes. And
It's going.
last on the 5th of April, we had uh, an unscheduled flight come to Delhi and pick up some 220 Koreans to take back to Korea. And
Hmm.
on that flight, Korea sent a number of equipment and testing kits on that flight. And so it's still going on.
Okay, and you know that you have a very developed health system, and there are many countries who have very developed health system, like Europe. Any country in Europe, they boast of very good health system. Even Americans, the most powerful country of the world, they must be having very good health system, but
Yes.
they are not coping up the way Koreans could cope. So how they are failing in saving their people? How they are failing in realizing that it can be done in a different way?
So I think, first of all, really, I think the most of the European countries and the US were not properly ready for this. They thought it was something that was happening in the Eastern Asia, and maybe if they closed their borders, that it wouldn't, that they could come out of it quite well.
Right.
But it turned out to be a different story, a different game. Um, for Korea's part, we were able to on top of the vigilance that the Korean public showed and the duly role that they played. Also, you should know that we had everything, all the information open, and so
Hmm.
we take a very we it's very important to us that
Hmm.
to maintain openness and transparency. And so all the information was never kept from the public. It was made open on the internet, and it was made open on the smartphones. And so we had various applications on the smartphones, for example, where you would be able to track other contagions. You would be able to find where infected people had been, and so it was for you to avoid those places.
Okay.
Um, and so the openness and the transparency and the information flow, I think, was very helpful for the Korean public to avoid and to stay away.
Also, all this wisdom, do you have any past experience like, MERS or SARS? Did your country learn from those experiences and they could be able to implement this now?
I think SARS was also a very scary
Right.
phase, but actually Korea did quite well at the time. I think we had about not many infected people at the time, and so the government's role has been always quite good, and we have this contingency plans already for these pandemics and these situations.
So when your country is not locked down, it was never closed. So industries were running all work that is there in industry, small sector, medium sector, everything was running. Government didn't need to give any stimulus to any company which is closed. So it was not a situation.
So what the government did was to announce a series of advisories to
Right,
urge the Korean public, to urge the
right.
Korean companies to follow through. And so obviously the industries were affected quite heavily. And so you would see that that the industries, as they were many of them voluntarily started to work from home. Um, Obviously, they couldn't run full time, run the full process. So many industries also in Korea are affected, and it's a very difficult time for the Korean economy as well.
So, Mr. Yu, you are in Delhi, and you have seen, experience of the West. You have seen experience of America. Also, you have seen South Korean experience. Do you think that the strategy that India is taking to combat the coronavirus is in right direction? How do you feel about it?
So I think every country has its own situation, and
Right,
depending on the kind of medical infrastructure that it has
right,
and the demographics,
right,
uh, I have I have to say that India, I think, did quite well. India uh, has only 7,000 or so infected cases so far,
right.
while other countries have soared through. So I think India is doing quite well. I don't know if the lockdown itself um, is the main reason why India is low, but I would say that in general, the approach that the Indian government has taken, I think, was very well done, and I think given the situation, the current situation at the moment, India is doing quite well. And obviously, we cannot foresee how this will pan out. But at the moment, it seems that um, India, compared to other places in the world, is a safer place.
So many questions have also been raised about role of WHO. Many countries told that WHO prescriptions were not right all the time. WHO in the beginning told that there is no human to human infection. They need to say that there is no need to travel ban, but it did not its experience was not good for everyone. So India also took a different type of strategy. So how do you think about the role of WHO in such situations?
To be just very objective, I think WHO always has a role to play in these crises, in these times of crisis. Um, Whether WHO took the correct decisions and went on the correct directions, this is, I think, history to decide and to judge. At the moment, though, I think individual countries are doing what they can to fight this pandemic. And obviously, there are countries who take a lot of influence from the WHO, and there are countries who take less influence. And so it again depends on your situation. But I think many countries also agree with the Prime Minister that WHO needs to go through some fine tuning.
But Prime Minister Narendra Modi, when he was speaking to G20 leaders by video conferencing, he had mentioned that WTO also need to be reformed. So do you think that WTO needs to be reformed? Some different type of format should be made for WTO so that it does not have to bear accusations that it is bearing now.
So to be quite honest with you, Dr. Akhilesh, I do not know our government's formal position on WHO's reformation. And so it's not really my position at this moment to comment. But obviously, I do feel that the Prime Minister mentioned it because he has the support of other countries. And so I do feel that there is a forum being created to discuss the reformation of WHO.
And we are coming to the last of our conversation. Just to tell me the type of industrialization that has taken place in the world. Lots of stress has been given on the industrial development, war economy development, missiles and airplanes, aircrafts, everything. But do you think that health should also be given much better importance by everyone, by developed country, by underdeveloped country, developing countries, everyone?
I think health industry, the medical industry, the medicine industry has been one of the biggest industries in developed countries. The US, Europe, industries there are very, very well advanced. But I do feel that it's not distributed, the knowledge isn't distributed properly. There is a kind of those kind of industries where we talk about defense industry, or we talk about the medical industry, the medicine industry, biotechnology industry. These industries have their own kind of categorization, and they have their own membership. And I do feel maybe there needs to be more transparency, more distribution,
Right.
much more advancement to the needs of the less developed countries.
And the type of questions that has been raised about sharing the information from China. Do you think that in future, if such disease take place, there should be more transparency, there should be more sharing of information and cautioning to the world than it had taken place this time?
Absolutely, absolutely. I do feel that if it was, if the information was passed on properly from the very initial stages, I think a lot of this could have been avoided. And so that kind of information sharing is essential. And I think we've learned from this pandemic that you cannot keep quiet on information. Okay. And it needs to be disseminated quickly before it becomes a world crisis such as this.
And you believe that this problem had germinated and came from China, like some of the countries are telling that it is not from China. Someone is telling that it is from China. What do you think?
So, many of the other diseases that we had experienced in our history came from different places. I think that we've also experienced similar epidemics sourcing from China. And I think, I think perhaps China needs to look at its situation a little bit more carefully, as we all do. And we've learned a big lesson through this pandemic.
So you say that China need to look inside.
I don't want to pinpoint China too much, but at the moment it shows that China, it came from China.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yoo. Thank you so much for talking to Raj Sabha Television.
It's my pleasure always talking to you.
That the world comes out of Corona menace sooner than later. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.